So what I'd like to do is just kind of go chronologically, if we can. I'm definitely interested in the guerrilla planting operations, but I want to start with, what was the beginning of your personal journey with cannabis?
Well, I suppose to start off, I would have been a big believer of some of the myths and all of that propaganda that was there around cannabis initially, because before I ever tried cannabis, I can remember my first encounter with it being through my cousin and me telling my cousin, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. It's going to rot your brain. It's not good for you. And maybe a couple of weeks later, that same cousin, through a bit of peer pressure, convinced me to try it out. And
So it wasn't a very deeply held belief of yours.
no, not deeply held belief,
Yeah. Was this uh you were growing up where in Ireland, and was this propaganda reaching you through the schools, through your parents, all of the above, the church? Where was it coming from?
Yeah, mostly for us, I suppose, would have been from schools, but also from the local Gardaí. They would have been informing the public as to the dangers of drugs, through the media as well. There was, but the media would have played probably the largest part of the misinformation over here.
And is there, at that time, did you feel like there was also a counterculture around cannabis in Ireland, or was it very, very underground? And how harsh were the laws at that time?
Yeah, I suppose the laws here weren't too bad at all. And even in my own experience, I was never really punished harshly. I got caught maybe 10 times before I actually got a criminal conviction. But still, nonetheless, it is rather traumatic to be stopped and searched, to have your belongings gone through and everything, to have your pockets searched, all because you're a consumer of this product, or more lately for myself, because of what I was wearing. I got identified in that respect, young fella wearing a hoodie and all of that. But definitely there is a kind of an underground culture over here really around it, but a lot of people don't talk about their use of cannabis. It was very hidden for quite a long time, even to now. So a lot of people still hide the fact that they use cannabis, but that is definitely changing here now.
And when was the first time that you tried it with your cousin? How did that change your views? And then how did getting busted for it for the first time change your views?
Well, I suppose for me, the first time I used cannabis, it was incredibly enjoyable. There was no real negative attachments to it all, to the whole experience. We would have been smoking hash at the time. So over here in Ireland, we were able to get soap bar hash, which I suppose, as quality goes, it's probably not the greatest quality. We were having to burn it into the joint, mixing it with tobacco as well, again, which isn't the greatest for your health. But still, nonetheless, the experience itself, the effects of the cannabis, I definitely enjoyed. And for me, the way I describe it now, looking back, especially looking back on it now, is I think for the first time I was really engaging with my own thoughts, that I believe as maybe a young person that I probably would have maybe being described with those letters, ADHD or something like that, because I was quite impulsive as a young person. And this was at the age of 15. I was first trying or the hash. So as I say, I believe it definitely allowed me to engage more with my thoughts. It grounded me more. It made me more present with what was going on around me. And I very much enjoyed that. Then there was the social aspects too, being included with cousins and friends, watching some movies, getting the munchies. So it was great. It wasn't at all a bad experience. It wasn't until 2 years later, as I say, 15 when I first tried it. 2 years later was when I first got caught with some hash. And as I said, that was a traumatic experience. I was out with my girlfriend at the time, and two female guards pulled us in a squad car, and they asked if we had anything in the car that shouldn't be in the car. And they informed me they were going to search the car anyway. So I was just like, look, I have a little bit of hash inside in the glove box there in my little tin. And they were like, right, get out of the car. They literally emptied every heart of the car, like all of the door pockets, everything, turned the whole car upside down, and tucked a little piece of hash I had, and then left me there to put all the stuff back together at the side of the road. Here in Ireland, then, we have a big backlog in our criminal justice system. It took them over a year to process my case. So I was 17 when I got caught. I should have been treated as a juvenile, as a young person. But unfortunately, because I turned 18 by the time they actually processed my case, I was dealt with as an adult. And from that first experience, it was incredibly negative, because when the guards brought the court summons to my front door, they met my parents, and my parents didn't like the fact that there was guards in with their marked squad car outside of the front door, coming in, bringing a summons to the door. It looked bad upon them with the neighbors, and reflected poorly upon the family. So that created a divide then between me and my family, because they were like, "Oh, you're bringing this trouble to our doorstep." And at the same time, for me, as I say, I was benefiting from using cannabis. It wasn't a negative experience only until I got caught. Like that whole two years that I was using the bit of hash and stuff, my mom actually complimented me on my behavior, that my mood, that I was a lot more thoughtful, I was a lot calmer, and a lot more pleasurable to be around, I suppose. So over that time, like there was benefits all around. And it wasn't until the law was actually applied, until I got caught with hash, then that the problems started occurring. And for me, after that first time, I went home, I educated myself, I started reading up about the law in Ireland. It was the Misuse of Drugs Act 1977, and just started educating myself on the whole history of it. Because in my experience, how I felt, that was an injustice. And when you experience an injustice in a democratic society, then you really have, it's up to you to stand up against it. Otherwise, you be quiet, and your silence is just going to perpetuate the suffering of many others after you. So
And
that was my belief.
thank you. And what, in the broadest sense, for an American audience in a way, what did you learn about the history of the cannabis laws in Ireland?
Well, in Ireland, it all started back in the early 20s. Again, it was pressure through the United Nations. The first, at the time, the land league, what was it called before the United Nations?
League
League of
of Nations.
Nations. That's the one, yeah. So the League of Nations put pressure on Ireland through, I believe it was the Egyptian hash laws or something like that. So that was the first introduction of them. And then it wasn't until a lot later, when there was more pressure again by the UN with the introduction of more acts over there. Ireland again started changing our laws here. So it was in 1977 that we actually introduced the Misuse of Drugs Act, and started really applying that law. Then we would have had a lot of troubles here as well with the IRA. They would have been robbing a lot of banks initially, but they then switched over to a more lucrative form of making money for their war, in selling cannabis and other drugs. So really, that would have been the whole scene here in Ireland for quite a long time. A lot of paramilitaries involved in the importation, the selling of drugs, and a lot of violence then attached to that then as well. So again, the Irish laws, they were definitely influenced by outside pressures, again coming through the United Nations.
And as you moved into activism, take me along that path. Where did you start, and how did you get to some of
Yeah.
the stuff you're doing now?
Well, I suppose initially it was a slow start. There was nowhere to really go initially when it first started. I had no one to turn to. There was very few people actually speaking about this here in Ireland. So a lot of the influence I was getting was coming from outside of Ireland. And I was looking across the pond over to America and Canada, where there was a lot going on. So I was getting inspired by a lot of what I was seeing then. And after maybe, when I was about 19, 2 years of just kind of researching and looking out, um, and speaking out, I found the Legalized Cannabis Ireland group in Ireland, a group of, again, like-minded young people, who are organizing themselves to kind of stand up against this. So from there, I just started meeting more like-minded people, and we started growing in our numbers, strengthening. Some people would come and go. A lot of people we've lost throughout the years. It's a very arduous thing to be an activist. It actually is. It's very draining, and I've seen a lot of people get burnt out by it and drop out then as a result. But for me, I could never really give up. It was just too much of a thing having criminal convictions, being treated like that. I just couldn't. Um, so from there, with the legalized cannabis Ireland, that would have evolved to the Students for Sensible Drugs policy, because I would have went back to college then. The Students for Sensible Drug policy, then I set that up in CIT, and we were just pushing out as much harm reduction information there. And I suppose even my position as an activist as well had evolved there, because before I got into college, while I was out there fighting for cannabis legalization, yeah, you're kind of looking across the trenches to the others who were also in this war on drugs with us, i.e., the other drug using communities, and they too are being stigmatized and were harshly affected because of this prohibition. So as I went into college, that argument evolved to we need to decriminalize all drug users and regulate a safe supply of drugs in order to have the most effective form of harm reduction in place, because as we know, prohibition has not worked to prevent people access to drugs at all. So we had a very good time there. 4 years in CIT, I achieved an honours degree in herbal science while I was there. But while we were there with the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, we had many tremendous events, including actually having Rick Simpson speak from, he was in Slovenia, I believe, or was it Lithuania? Somewhere, or Slovakia, I think it was. He Skyped into us, but he talked all about his work with the cannabis plant. And we had a great, it was a packed house that night. We actually had to turn people away. There was that much interest in the event. Um, Graduated college then since, obviously, and I have my honors degree now in herbal science. And it's been tough to try to get a job here, and because I have convictions for cannabis possession, and because of how outspoken I am too on this as well. So it's a small sacrifice I pay to be an activist in Ireland, unfortunately, but I'm happy to pay it, because this is a worthy cause to fight for.
Thank you. And what year did you graduate college? Just to give me a sense of the timeline.
Yeah, 2018. I graduated herbal science, so October 2018.
Um, and let me ask you about this idea of this sort of guerrilla planting of cannabis. What is the origin of that idea? And then when was the first time you actually put that into practice?
Yeah, I suppose it was always something I was thinking before, when being threatened with criminal convictions in court. I always was, because in Ireland, basically, if you get caught the first time, and for me it was the first few times, up to 9 times, you get this kind of opportunity to make a donation to what they call the charity court box. And by doing that, then you receive no criminal conviction and you can walk away a free man. And for me, I managed to do that 9 times. Majority of the time represented myself legally, speaking for myself. And the way I see it, it's I don't know, it was kind of like buying your way into like cleaning your sins. Do you know the way the Catholic Church used to do that before? You used to be able to go down and buy alms or whatever it was called. You pay a few money, a few quid, and your sins are forgiven. You can get into heaven now when you die.
Yeah,
It's kind
an
of like that
indulgence.
almost. Yeah, yeah. It was just it felt like such a money racket to me throughout it. But unfortunately for me, I was afforded to do it 9 times before I actually received the conviction, because between 17 and 21, I was stopped and searched, I'd say close to 100 times by the guards there. So that's quite a lot to be stopped and searched. I got caught, as I say, 12 times with never more than 50 euros worth of cannabis, which would be less than 3 grams of cannabis, just so you understand that. Um, and then through the court system, and I always said that once I get a conviction, I'm going to go down to the Garda station every day with a little piece of cannabis, with a joint, and I'm going to smoke that there, in defiance of the law, to kind of stand up and say, "Hey, I'm not afraid of you and the way in which you treat me, because this is a violation of my human rights." I always felt like it was a violation of my human rights. And it wasn't until I really learned about the medical benefits of cannabis that I truly learned how it actually is a violation of your human rights, in terms of like just restricting you access to such an effective medicine. So that's where the thought originated. I never actually went ahead with that initially because it's a scary it's a scary thing to do. But then in April of 2019, I got caught with €10 worth of cannabis, and I was up in court then for that in last year. And after that court case, I was just enough is enough. Also, that coupled too with the case of Alicia Maher. Alicia Maher is a patient who used to be located here in Cork, but unfortunately had to leave and move to Alicante in Spain. And that was because in Alicante, Spain, she can go in and buy cannabis through a club, kind of a local cooperative. It still operates in a grey area there. It's not legal in Spain, unfortunately, but they can still access it effectively. But Alicia had to leave Ireland in the middle of doing her PhD in law. So that incredibly affected her. But her condition, it all started with getting her tonsils removed at the age of 17. A series of complications. A number of years later, she ended up contracting MRSA and had to get like some of her intestines removed as well. Like very unfortunate for her. It was just a series of unfortunate events, but it left her with a lifelong of chronic pain, relying on over 60 opiate-based tablets a day. And a friend recommended cannabis to her, and upon trying it, the difference was day and night, going from being stuck on the couch every day on these pain pills, leading a kind of a colorless life, as she described it, to trying cannabis and all of a sudden being able to get up and about and actually enjoy life again and actually smile and laugh and joke and enjoy those kind of pleasurable things as a person should be entitled to do. So taking those two things in mind, my treatment on the social justice side of it, but also the patient side of it, I was just, enough is enough. We need to remove this plant from the Misuse of Drugs Act here, end this prohibition, in order to provide the most effective access for the patients here, but also to undo all of the suffering caused by this prohibition. So that's what motivates me. That's the fuel that's burning inside.
And was she somebody that you knew just because she's also from Cork prior to all of this happening to her, or you became aware of her because of her medical cannabis use?
Yeah, I would have became aware of her because of a local radio station. I would have heard Alicia speak out in that radio station one morning, and I would have rang in afterwards as well, and kind of contributed there as well in support of Alicia. And then Alicia later on, she organised a medical cannabis symposium in Limerick University where she was studying, and I attended that, got to meet with Alicia there, and an incredible woman, a real warrior. And it wasn't long after that symposium, actually, Alicia then left Ireland. She's been out of Ireland now for a year and a half. Or more than a year and a half now, almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in November. That's a long time to have to be removed from your home, all because
Yeah,
of just the access to this plant there. That's so
I understand. Um, well, let's talk about that first time that you did do a gorilla planting.
yeah. Well, it would have been done again with Alicia in mind, because I used a little garden tags. I don't have actually any around. I thought I might have had one nearby, but just small little plant labels, and I put hashtag Bring Alicia Home, hashtag Talk to Vera, and hashtag Patients for Safe Access. As I'm a director here of Patients for Safe Access in Ireland, along with another few patients and campaigners. So that was the idea, to plant these cannabis plants with these tags. I done it live on Facebook too, so that there was no
Mhm.
hiding who done it. I wanted to make sure that I got my statement out as to why I'm doing it. That the law is causing far more suffering than these plants, and then brought up the patient story, and I left them there. Then encouraged people to come down, get their photos taken with the plants, and to share it across social media using those hashtags. And it was quite successful. And to be very honest, the plants were there the very first time I planted the plants. I planted 6 male plants. There were 6 male plants that a friend had. Obviously, males aren't as useful as the females, so he was quite happy to donate those to the cause. And they were a nice size too. He actually grew them, collected a bit of pollen for himself, but we brought them down, planted them. They were about maybe just shy of 12 inches tall. So they're nice size plants. And we planted those on some public garden boxes that were out there. And with the support of the community, there was a local cafe that takes care of those boxes. And they seen the action, and they gave me the thumbs up. They were like, "Oh, this is great," because they were actually looking to go down the road of selling CBD products, CBD flowers, more importantly. So they were like, "This is great. We want to see more of this." So, so those plants were there for 2 weeks. There was no issues with them at all. Many people got photos with them. There was a lot of talk about them kind of on social media, but it wasn't until the local media, or the national media, the Irish Times, they contacted the Gardaí after doing an interview with me to get comment from the Gardaí. The Gardaí obviously gave him no comment, but said that they're investigating. And within a half hour of that phone call, the plants were removed. So within about 2-3 hours of that, once I got an image sent to me, of a guard walking away with the plants. So I was like, right, got on to my buddy. I was like, "Do you have more plants ready?" And he said, "I do." So I got 9 plants then next time, and I went down and I planted 9 more. Got onto the media. I was like, "Those plants were removed, but they're replaced now, and there's more there this time." You know, it's kind of like the heads of the Hydra. Now we're gonna, play cat and mouse a little bit with them. So they were there for another few days. Those got removed. And again, I went down, planted more, but this time I actually didn't go to the same spot. I went to our city hall and I planted a number of plants then in the city hall here. Again, just to send a message to the people in charge that, come on, something needs to be done here, address this issue. People are suffering right now. And I would go as far as say people are dying, because when you look at epilepsy, if there's somebody out there now who's suffering from a seizure that could potentially be prevented if they had effective access to cannabis, that person potentially could die. Yes, every seizure has a potential to take a person's life, the serious ones anyway. So there really needs to be, this issue really needs to be addressed. So for me, this kind of escalation, the risks I'm facing, it's worth it. They're going to do what to me? Like, they're going to bring me to court. They're going to bring me to prison. When I go to prison, I got a warm cell, I got a soft bed, I got a TV in my cell, 3 hot meals a day. I even got gym, yard time, leisure, all of that stuff. But what do the patients have? If I don't challenge this, if I don't put myself out there like this, it's what do they have? They have a life of suffering, in pain, without suffering with seizures, suffering with nausea associated with chemotherapy and things like that. There's so much suffering associated with the lack of access to this plant. So for me to pay that small price, that they have to go and live that little life of luxury that some of our prisoners do here in Ireland, then so be it. I'll go do it. I'm prepared for that, because, as I said, this is a violation of my human rights. And we all have, John Martin Luther King would have once said, you not only have a moral duty to obey just laws, but you just also have a moral duty to disobey unjust laws. So it's kind of taking that into the perspective.
And what have you seen in terms of positive effects from this, particularly from the government or from the media?
I suppose for me, the positive effects is definitely we've got people talking about this. I managed to capture the attention of the public for, I would say, a good 3-week period. Got a lot of coverage in the media, radio interviews, the national press, printing stories on it. And each time there was a very fair coverage. They really got the point across of my action, that the action was to highlight the suffering caused by the prohibition of cannabis, and they attached the patient story then, more importantly, with that. So for me, it was all worthwhile. It was an incredibly successful campaign, and I'm going to continue to do it. I've always set up on our minister, who's in charge for national drug strategy. His name is Frank Fian, and he's basically put in place, because he's I don't know, I'd maybe describe him as a professional doorstopper. He's there to as a doorstop to stop the progress of that was being made by ministers previous to him, because we were making progress here in Ireland in terms of the conversation around the decriminalisation of the drug user, legalisation of cannabis. But unfortunately, since Frank Feehan has after taken the reins, and then our health minister with him too, who also is responsible for drugs policy, Stephen Donnelly, there has been just a complete stagnation of any progress. There's been nothing happening. Even our medicinal cannabis access program, which is incredibly discriminatory, it's only got 3 conditions listed there, and all of those conditions, well, 2 of the conditions are refractory, meaning like, yeah, you have to try all of the other available medicines first. Or sorry, all 3 of them are refractory actually. Even treating the nausea associated with chemotherapy, you also have to try the drugs that are on market for that, and those have to not work before you're allowed access to cannabis, and only through your consultant, your general practitioner, your local family doctor who you know and knows you most. They are not allowed to apply for a medical cannabis license for you. Even if you have one of those 3 conditions, you can only do it in Ireland through a specialist, a health consultant.
And I could probably look this up, but what's your sense through polling? Where does the citizenry, the voters in Ireland, what do they think of this issue? Because, for example, in the United States, there was a long period, and we still don't have federal legalization, where, right now, somewhere between 60 and 70% of people approve legalization, and much higher for medicinal, but the laws are still far behind that. Is that what you find in Ireland, or is there still a lot of people buying into the propaganda? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, I would definitely say in the recent 12 months, there's been a number of polls done in Ireland, some by national media, kind of online media, but more important, but there was one important one done by a company called Red Sea Polls, and they do all of our political polls. They're probably the go-to any of the big main political parties. They always use the Red Sea Polls as kind of being the standard. And a recent Red Sea poll done found that there was over 80% support for a change in our laws here for cannabis in Ireland. So an overwhelming majority of people who took part in that survey supported it. And that also matched other surveys done again, less reputable ones done online through local media and stuff like that. But all of those as well coming back with overwhelmingly the majority of people in support of reform of our laws here in Ireland, whether it be like just for medical access or for wider adult access. There was one poll that separated them, and there was 40% of people were for medical only. There was another 40% for medical and adult recreational, if you use that term. I don't like it. And then there was only 17% of people against, while 3% of people said they didn't know. So yeah, definitely the political people in charge, the people in power, they're way out of touch with the public desire at the moment. There's a citizens' assembly coming up here in Ireland, which is a very important piece of kind of a process that goes on here. And especially we bring 99 citizens in with one judge, and they get presented to on a topic. And we had big changes in our constitution here in Ireland in recent years, and the Citizens' Assembly was a big part of that as well, where it was gay marriage was introduced, and that was changed to our constitution, and also the repealing the 8th Amendment as well, which would have allowed for abortion in Ireland too. And those changes came about after Citizens' Assembly. So the one coming up now is going to be on the decriminalisation of the drug user, and also there seems to be a push there for a separate room on the legalisation of cannabis too to run alongside of that. That's supposed to happen early next year. So if that was to go ahead and all going well, we should have favourable outcomes in that. And that should untie the hands of the government then, because it seems like those in charge don't want to be responsible for any negative outcomes that might be tried to be thrown back at them for changing these laws and drugs. So by having the citizens assembly, they can now kind of wash their hands of any blame and say, well, look, it's ye the citizens, ye wanted this now through this assembly. So that's my kind of view on this, that they're waiting for this citizens assembly. So we could see some very positive things happening here within the next 6 months. We also have Gino Kenny. He's a TD with the People Before Profit here, which is basically a minister within our government, or not a minister, a politician within our government. And he's going to be putting forward a bill for the legalization of cannabis later this year. That's going to be hopefully published by the end of this month, maybe early next month. He hasn't actually published any draft of it yet at the moment, but it's definitely going to be going forward, and it's going to be seeking to just legalize cannabis access for adults aged 18 and over, I would imagine. Again, I don't know what's in it, so I don't know what age limit he's going to put onto it. But also included in that will be the allowance for home cultivation and the setting up of retail outlets as well for the sale of cannabis. So hopefully that goes well. He's going to push for an open vote on that. So effectively where the politicians can't be whipped in line by the party whip. So hopefully he gets that open vote, and that will give the bill a little bit more chance of passing, because without that open vote, it's going to fall flat in its face otherwise.
And for you, in the meantime, are there plants in the ground now? Are you still engaging in this activity?
Yeah, and I'm not alone in this. I've inspired many people across Ireland. I get
Uh,
pictures every day of people across Ireland who've planted a plant with a little tag on it as well, the exact same kind of fashion as my own action, using the same hashtags as well. And it's great to see. So again, I can understand those people don't want to do it live and record themselves. So they express themselves through the medium that I give them on Martin's World. So yeah, that's been great to see, just the inspiration that you can kind of have, the motivation you can give to other people to kind of just do their do their little part too. So we're seeing plants pop up all over Ireland. Right
uh,
now in Cork, I know that there's at least two in the city right now.